So welcome to everyone joining us tonight, whether you're watching us live or on the version that we have sent to you. We hope you will find this evening's webinar, Back to School, Navigating the Road Ahead, with our friends from the University of Houston College of Medicine, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. First, we have Dr. Casa, a psychiatrist and co-director of the Behavioral Medicine course for the University of Houston's brand new College of Medicine. Kristen contributes to the educational programs in behavioral health and psychiatry in the curriculum. She's also a psychiatrist who practices at the Lone Star Circle of Care clinics at the University of Houston. Dr. Omar Matuk is a clinical assistant professor in pediatrics at the University of Houston College of Medicine. He's responsible for pediatric preclinical and clinical curriculum and the development of the direct primary care model for the uninsured population, which is wildly important and one of the big missions of our new College of Medicine. He is also a practicing pediatrician at the Lone Star Circle of Care Clinic at the University of Houston. So I want to welcome both of you to the program today. And just quickly, first off, thank you, Kristen and Omar, for joining us. Kristen, I'll start off with some basic introductions. First off, be sure and unmute yourself, but thank you so much for joining tonight. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say congratulations before we start our program tonight with the College of Medicine having its white coat ceremony and its first group of students. What's the atmosphere in the college like right now?
It's been an amazing and exciting time for all of us. I joined the faculty a little over a year ago from another medical school, and this has been such an energetic, collaborative experience. Our students joined us a few weeks ago. They embody our mission. They are passionate about care, and they're so excited to become doctors who are primary care doctors who serve the needs of our community.
What particularly drew you to come from that other medicine college to join the University of Houston's newly founded College of Medicine?
Sure. I knew Dr. Spann, who is our founding dean, and had a tremendous amount of respect for him and a tremendous amount of respect for his vision. And I think one of the exciting things is, if you've been in a medical school that's been in existence for a long time, is you build on what you have. But here we are building it brand new and different, and with different ways of delivering content and different emphasis on our students. So it was an opportunity to spend more of my career investing in the futures of our doctors.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll be right back to you after I introduce Dr. Matuk to everyone. Omar, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your service to the University of Houston. I'll ask you kind of the same question. What drew you to the university, and what's the vibe like on that yet to be built, but everyone's enthusiastically pulling in the same direction, college?
No, thank you for the introduction, Mike. I'm glad to be here. I joined the college because I was attracted by the mission. I think in Houston, and this school in particular, it has the mission to improve the care of the underserved, and also to train a future generation of physicians that will practice in the areas that traditionally no one wants to practice. So that was something that really attracted me to this college. And I will take a quote from Dr. Spann. I think we're flying a plane and building as we're flying. That's how we are feeling right now. We are fortunate to be here. We have great leadership. So I think every day is something new and exciting is happening, and we're fortunate to be here.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. And of course, thank you to the College of Medicine for their partnership with the Alumni Association to bring this programming not only live, but to our alumni throughout the course of the year. Tonight will be, wildly valuable information for everybody that is watching. I know that we are on the precipice of sending our kids back to school. Some have done that already. There have been some states that have sent their students back to school. But I know the University of Houston itself's move-in starts on Monday. So we have, 4,000 or 5,000 students moving back to campus, but you all have a great presentation for us tonight. So I don't want to stay in your way. Who is going to lead us off tonight? Dr. Casa, are you going to lead us off tonight, or is Dr. Matuk going to lead us off?
Let me try to share my screen. Hopefully I do it right.
Okay.
And I'll start, and then I'll have Dr. Casa.
Okay. You should be able to. I want to thank all, oh, there you go. I usually speak during the technical spot in case there's an awkward moment, but you have got it, Doctor. It's all yours.
Yes. So you're all seeing the presentation, right?
That's right. Yes, correct.
Okay. So nice to meet you all. As Mike was mentioning, this talk will be a broad topic of COVID-19 that I'm sure all of you have heard about in the news, and some questions about what are you going to do when we're going to be back in the school and how this is affecting children. So we already did introductions. So I'm just gonna go briefly. What do we know of COVID-19? What's happening among children? Clearly, pediatric cases have been reported on the literature. Worldwide, there's 1 and 2% of confirmed cases within the 5 million cases that we all have heard in the news. And clearly, children have been grossly underrepresented in all case numbers. It has to do with children having kept at home. They sometimes don't get the testing that they need. And because of that, we have, the conclusion is that children are now at low risk. And just be mindful that all this information is really changing by the day. So perhaps as we are recording this session, some of this information by the time it's recording in 1 or 2 months might not be as accurate as information at that time. And I think that's a disclosure that we should probably have. Children are staying home because we want to protect the vulnerable population and the people that are susceptible most of the time. What do we know in Harris County? I took these photos from the 2 sites that I will recommend people to go and look information. We are lucky enough to have the biggest medical center in the world, and TMC has put a wonderful site that up to yesterday was updated, in which you all can look the graph from the day. I chose purposefully the effective reproduction rate graph. This is a number that epidemiologists use to see how is the community spread. So as you can see, in Houston, we are already less than 1, which is good, but it's not the best. And the reason I am bringing this up in the topic of COVID in children and back to school is because we have to think that a school is a microcosmos of whatever is happening in the community. So whenever we discuss a decision, we need to see what is actually happening in the community. And following that, the other picture that we're seeing is from the Harris County Public Health, in which we can see the number of cases is roughly 90,000. And as you can see here in the group H, the children are still not underrepresented compared to the other age groups, which tend to be more young adults, and actually people like between 15 and 55 years are grossly the represented cases. Now, you may wonder, what is the evidence at this point of the viral spread in children? Viral spread means how much children can transmit the COVID, because that's a concern. So up to date, there's evidence that young children, especially below 10 years of age, does not transmit as much as adults. And there are some studies that say that if you are above 10, you may have the same level of transmission as an adult individual. And also we have to keep in mind that children, they can have a lot of virus in their body, but we don't know if that virus is actually being transmitted. So this information that is evolving as we go. You probably saw the news that on Georgia, there was a camp and children contracted the virus. So that's, as you can see, is information that is going to come up, and we will see how this evolves over time. So what symptoms we can expect on children? The symptoms could be from no symptoms whatsoever to a severe disease, what is called multi-system inflammatory disease. Common symptoms that I see in the practice, we have a clinic here at the University of Houston College of Medicine in the first floor of the second building, and we are seeing children that have COVID positive test. Most of these kids, actually I will say all of the children that I have seen here are asymptomatic, If so, they might have a mild cough or a runny nose. Most of the time they are bring to the clinics because the parents tend to be positive, and those are the ones that are more asymptomatic. But there's a concern within the pediatric community of an inflammatory syndrome that appears between 2 to 4 weeks after children develops or contacts COVID. The cases are still very low. In the entire United States, there has been reported today 300,000 cases of COVID in children, and this rare syndrome has been in around 90 reported cases. So as you can see, it's something to consider, but it's still pretty rare. As I was mentioning prior, adolescents and teens are more like an adult, so they will have fever, cough, runny nose, more severe symptoms like the ones we are used to see on COVID. So the question comes, what can I do as a parent to prevent the spread of COVID? And as you will see, there are common measurements that we all need to be doing. We really need to be hand washing, that's the number one. Preferably, we like the hand washing with soap and water. If not available, we can use the hand sanitizer. We have to teach our children to cover when they cough or they sneeze. And the best way to do this is by modeling. If the adults do it, then the children will do it. So a lot of this has to do with our own behavior. We have to show them to avoid touching their faces. That might be hard with a toddler, but overall we have to avoid that. And try to disinfect any areas that they touch, especially any toys if they play on an infected area. We recommend to respect the safe at home orders recommendations. Right now we're at level 1 and hurry. So really, if they don't need to go out, it's better for them to stay at home. And especially if children are ill, we would like them to stay home, not to do the Tylenol trick, as we call it, the pediatricians, in which the kid has a fever, they give the Tylenol in the morning and they send to school. I think that is not a good strategy at this point. And even for a college student, that also should not be happening. This is a question that Dr. Casa and I, we think. We put this slide thinking, okay, we're gonna talk about this. Should kids go back to school, yes or no? To be fair, no one has an answer to that question. But I want us to just focus on the facts and the current science that we have. If there's no community spread, then the CDC recommends to open the schools, right? But of course, we have to have a plan. We have to be prepared. We have to teach and reinforce healthy hygiene and really develop an information that systems that shares all the information with the parents, with the teachers, and with the local health department. If we have a minimal or moderate or substantial community spread, as you can see, the recommendation is to coordinate with local health officials. At the end, whatever is happening in the community is going to happen in a school. So if we're having, which right now in Houston is roughly between 15 or 20% positivity rate, it's logical to expect that the same percentage rate will happen at a school if it's open. So the decision to open or not, it depends which outcome do we want. If it's safe to open, it will depend how well we control the transmission within the community. And I know we're gonna have questions, so I'm gonna just keep going and transition to my colleague, Dr. Casa, which is gonna touch about all the psychosocial aspects that the kids have with this disease.
And to our guests that are on live, thank you so much, Doctor. To our guests that are on live, you can type your questions in the chat, or you can wait till the end as we go along. Okay, Doctor, back to you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to share my screen in order to have control of it. Let's see. Trying to get back to where I can see my screen. So it's not letting me see. I'm gonna have to look away, so I apologize because I have a setup and it's showing the other screen right now. So not only do I come to this as a psychiatrist, I come to this as a parent. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old who attend public school, and I have spent my summer wondering what fall was going to look like for them. So I want to touch on some of the ways our kids tell us they're under stress. And I think that that's one of the things that we're going to be looking for in the upcoming months. And the first thing we need to think about is, what do kids do at different ages? What is their job? Besides going to school, what are they supposed to develop? And emotionally, a preschooler is trying to be in control. They're trying to learn to play with other children as opposed to side by side. They want to please others, and they think very concretely. So if they get sick and you say, you have a stomach bug, a 4-year-old might think that they actually have a bug in their stomach, and that's what makes them sick. Then moving on to our 5 to 11-year-olds, there's a wide gap between a 5-year-old and 11-year-old. So it's a continuum. And our 5-year-old is going to look a little bit more like our preschooler, and our 11-year-old's going to look a little bit more like our adolescent. But they're starting to move into meaningful relationships. Their job is to be industrious, to create, to accomplish. And when they master tasks, they have a sense of success. So school gives them a sense of success. And they begin to think abstractly. They don't think there's a bug in their tummy, but they might not quite understand all of the nuances of how diseases spread. Then our adolescents, well, their job is to form an independent identity removed from their parents. And so they start to look for validation and identification away from us. They are also looking to they come looking to parents at times as well. One important thing to remember, they are abstract thinkers, and they have the ability to cognitively grasp some of these mature ideas. However, because their frontal lobes, the very front of their brain, are not fully, completely mature, they're not good at assessing risk, they're not good at delayed gratification, and they're not good at long-term planning, which are some fundamental things you need to do in order to be safe. So I want to talk a little bit about, what do stressed preschoolers and kids look like? Well, remember I said they were concrete. So they often can't tell us in emotional words how I'm feeling. They're going to act it. So they're going to have tantrums, or they're going to cry. They might change their sleeping or eating habits. They might be reluctant to part with us. They often, if they don't want to go to school, if there's something scaring them at school, a person scaring them at school, they won't come to you and have a lengthy conversation about, their interpersonal relationship. They're going to tell you their tummy hurts and they can't go to school. School-age kids are in some way similar. They often, what we call, somaticize or have physical manifestations of those emotions, but they will have trouble with their job, which is doing their schoolwork, being industrious. They may develop nervous behaviors like nail biting, and they can become anxious about one of us getting sick or losing one of us. And then our teenagers are going to have more adult manifestations, but they're also, again, whatever your job is at that age, when you're under stress, you don't do it as well. So they may withdraw from those all-important peer experiences. They may be more irritable or defiant. They also may have trouble with sleep and schoolwork and attention and focus. So we need to be ready to talk with our kids about this stress. We need to respond to little kids, direct answer, short answer. We need to watch the information that goes in that we don't give them. TV, the television's on and there's scary stuff and they're watching it and they can't process it. It may be detrimental. We need to use physical contact like hugs and stuffies and loveys to make them feel safe. Our school-age kids, they also have a wide variation. So that 5-year-old's going to be struggle a little bit more with information than, say, our 10-year-old. But we still need to target our information for their cognitive development. It's okay to tell these kids that we don't know. We don't know when they're going back to school. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we're going to be there for them in their fears. And we also, not to pretend or not acknowledge our fears, but not to become so pulled down on our own fears that they can't use us to feel somewhat safe. And then finally, our teens, they're going to be getting a lot of information from other kids and social media, from the internet. So we need to make sure that they're getting high quality information and help them find and assess high quality information. And also make sure we empathize with those loss of relationships outside of our home. So all that brings me to what is going to cause our kids less stress. That was my big equation, is how are my kids going to be safe, and how am I going to minimize the stress that they feel? So the CDC actually has a checklist that parents can go through with several factors and sort of do an inventory of whether it's right to go back to school for their family, because at the end, it's really an individual decision. And so some of the things that I think would weigh a family to say in-person instruction is better for my child is a home situation that may not support or have adequate supervision, may not have the access to technology. A child has some sort of special emotional or cognitive or learning issues that they need additional support. The child relies on school for nutrition and other social needs, or the kid very much needs that social contact and is really experiencing stress from the absence of their friends. Whereas online instruction might be more appropriate if a family is concerned about the health status of the child, the health status of a parent, or maybe a family member if they have a multi-generational household. A child who might be anxious with certain restrictions in place, if the child may not be able to wear a mask, if the child is very anxious to start with and the new rules of social distancing or having to sit in your seat may be a problem, that might be a child who's emotionally better suited to be at home. Also making sure we have the resources for virtual instruction, both technology and personal support, and that we're able to create meaningful relationships between children, even when they're not at school. And that can happen virtually through various messenger apps or Google Duo. So I put together some tips because people say, well, gosh, you know, and I've heard it, and I knew that last spring was not the greatest for any of us. So I have said, we're going to do it better this year. School's going to be more organized, but I'm going to have the kids ready to go. And so I want them to have an organized, quiet place. I want them to have a bin with all their school supplies. Our district has put forth a very good schedule alternating between in-person, synchronous learning and asynchronous reinforcement. I want my kids to use a checklist of all the assignments they need to do and get done, or any projects or tests, because I think that's a great skill to have, just period. And now we can reinforce it. I want them to have their water and their snacks so they're not always getting up out of their seats. I want them using headphones. Now my kids are too young to have phones, but if they weren't, my rule would be, if you can't do it in a classroom at school, you can't do it while you're online learning at home. And then finally, for anyone who has, say, any sort of individual accommodations, like a 504 plan or an IEP, those are going to be reviewed early in the year, and we need to have a good communication with our teacher about what those look like. And then if your child is going to return to in-person school, there will be some anxiety, but you can focus on seeing friends and going back to familiar teachers and a familiar place and a familiar routine. We need to prepare our children for, it's not going to be like last year. Lunch is not going to be the same. The classroom isn't going to be the same. You're going to have to wash your hands. And some of our more hyperactive or impulsive children may struggle a bit with this. Again, we're going to be giving them emotional cues. So if we're highly anxious about that return to school, they may pick up on that. Always watch them for signs of increasing anxiety. That's like taking their temperature every day. We also take their emotional temperature. Our kids haven't really been anywhere since March. So for kids who really do struggle to separate from parents, it's going to be twice as hard as it has been before. And we also need to prepare our children for sudden changes. School, we may not have school next week if the cases suddenly spike. And finally, I don't want to forget the grown-ups. We have to be healthy parents in this. We have to be prepared for this. So my first is take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay. We're not gonna lose too much instruction. We're not gonna lose too much social interaction. Kids are amazingly emotionally and cognitively resilient. deep breath. But we need to, as adults, have a routine for ourselves, for the whole house. We need to connect with our friends, even if it's a 20-minute socially distant, sit down and say hi. That's so meaningful. We have to have our own time and space to recharge, take a walk, read a book by yourself, and consider getting help. You know, all of us have had that moment with our kids where they're like, I need help with my math. Okay, let me help you. That's not how my teacher does it. Well, that's how I learned it. Well, that's not how she does it. And, you know, and that can get kind of ugly night after night. So I will actually encourage parents whose children are struggling academically, get them help from the teacher, get them a tutor. You don't need to add that stress to your parent-child relationship. And finally, be aware of your own anxiety. We have been in this for a long time. And even there was apparently Michelle Obama does a podcast and acknowledged even some feelings of sadness and depression and loss in her own life this weekend. So all of us, we did not expect to be in this for the long haul. I think a lot of us thought this would look very different by the fall. And I think we're grieving what we thought would get better. So it's normal to feel a little sad. It's normal to feel some grief. It's normal to feel some anxiety. But if that is interfering with your ability to eat or sleep or take care of your kids or do your job, then it might be time for you to reach out and get some support for yourself. Many therapists, including our own therapists in our clinics at UH, are offering virtual appointments. Your primary care doctor probably offering virtual appointments. Same with many psychiatrists. So there's nothing to stand in your way from getting some necessary support if you need that. So I'm going to stop there and hopefully we can open this up for some questions and discussion.
Yep, we have some folks on the line, so if you'd like to ask a question, you can do that. And while you're thinking of your first question that you want to enter in the chat, I have a few that I would like to fire off so that we get everybody started. Don't be afraid. Your questions make it go. So for Dr. Matuk, so you mentioned cleaning things and making sure you clean things down like plush animals and things like that. My question would be, how long does the virus live in those things? How long does the virus live in a mask? What does the research show? How long does it live in, like, you don't have to bring your kid straight home from school and take everything off and wash it. What's that routine look like on cleaning things every day for them?
Yes, it's a good, so the research on, depending on the answer will be depending on the surface that we're talking about. And the evidence is not clear. So I think my answer will be more like this. Let's try, you can touch an infected surface, but as long as you wash your hands before you touch your face, then really it does not matter if the surface was infected. I hope that answered the question. But they say 48 hours, 72 hours, it could last.
Okay.
But that may change.
And I love straightforward answers. That's the answer. I'm going to ask both of you a question that could be answered by either one of you, and that's on modeling. You know, I know Dr. Casa, you talked about, you know, the adult or the parent behaviors, right, of remaining calm and not overreacting to maybe a symptom. And then Dr. Matuk, you talked about modeling the wearing of masks and what you're doing. So maybe each of you can speak to how important modeling is to kids from the adults in the room, for lack of a better term. Who wants to take that one first?
I can say the modeling. So a concrete example, and I'm gonna use the wearing a mask because that's kind of, I will say, the only tool or effective tool that we have as a society that has been shown that demonstrates that reduces the COVID. So if as a parent, I start complaining of using a mask, perhaps even cursing, using it wrong, then the kids are gonna do that. So I think it's very important to recognize that we can say a lot of things to our children, but they will see what we do. So whatever we do, it needs to be right.
And Kristen, I'm sorry, for yours, I was really looking at the modeling on reaction to symptoms, like overreaction or underreaction. What are your thoughts there?
So I actually had something, one of my children got sick with a bacterial infection this summer, and we had to go to urgent care. We walk into urgent care and the woman starts rattling off all of the possible symptoms of COVID. And my daughter has on this little mask and she looks over at me and her eyes keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because it was like headache, sore throat, upset stomach, and body aches and fever. And my daughter's like, and I could see her look and I was like, you don't have COVID, okay? You don't, trust me. And so she was really, she was very anxious when she got sick that that's what it was. Thankfully, they really haven't been too preoccupied with that. Our family has been very much, except for a couple of things, we've stayed home. Now, I think emotionally also, you have to find that sweet spot. There was one day, and it was the day that the school had the kids come pick up their school supplies that had been left in their desks in March. And my younger daughter just, heavy, hard tears. And I cried with her because I wanted her to know how sad I was that, she didn't have her end of year experiences. We got everything back in a plastic bag.
Yeah, those are rough moments. I think I don't know a single person who doesn't have an example of having lost something, or something got canceled, or something got postponed, or weddings or graduations or proms or parties or 5th grade last days or whatever those are. It's been kind of interesting all along. I can ask either one of you, and maybe Dr. Matuk in this case, I'm just guessing, but either one of you can take this. Let's say something does happen and you do come across someone. What does quarantine mean? If you get sent home to quarantine, what is the parameters of quarantine mean? Does that mean you're in a certain room, you're in a certain house, you have to stay in a certain car? I mean, what's the serious restrictions of quarantine for a young person who may get sent home because of contact tracing, or someone identified that maybe they were in contact with someone? What does that quarantine mean to you all when you're explaining it to a parent?
Yes, I mean, the good news, that's defined by the CDC. So if there's a space at home and you can do it, and if you were in contact with someone with COVID, it's recommend that patient self-isolate for the next 10 days. And that means if there's the option, right, being on a separate room from the rest of the family, wearing a mask if you go to common areas, but preferably stay in that room. As Dr. Casa was saying, that's why we're offering the patients the option of telemedicine, because we actually have to follow up with COVID patients in the room via telemedicine until we have the results back. But that's our recommendation, 10 days of isolation.
Okay, thank you very much. And those of you that are joining us, if you have a question, feel free to put those in the chat. Usually takes just one person to break the seal, and next thing you know, we get 10 questions. So feel free. You're probably thinking the same thing we are. Dr. Casa, the medical context of the mental context of going back to school, is that in some cases more stressful than the physical context of going back to school for parents? The mental hurdle of, am I doing the right thing for my child? Am I making sure my child's in a safe space? It seems like that's, I have a college student, so mine's a little bit different, but my neighbors have middle school students, and one of my neighbors is just wrought with the thought that what if I send her and she gets sick? The mental thing seems like even more difficult to get over than getting the facts and what are the percentages. Speak to the mental aspects of parenting, and when your maternal instincts kick in, and believe those. If you could speak to that.
So we always fear what we don't know the most, and we don't know. I don't know. I think we can get in sort of, because we don't know, we can get paralyzed in analyzing and analyzing and analyzing, and look at this website and that website and talk to this friend, and oh, God forbid, get on social media and watch that. I think that's why it helps to have something like the CDC checklist, is to be able to go through that and say, okay, what is my situation? What is my comfort level? What am I going to do that's the right thing for my family? And when, I think it was maybe late July, my husband and I started to have a discussion about what we thought would be best for us and what our big picture ideas about this. And I think we had pretty much decided we were going to, regardless, we were going to choose a virtual option for at least the first 9 weeks of school, regardless of what happened. And that was what we felt really comfortable with. And so I think it's finding your comfort.
Dina has a question. Thank you, Dina, for keeping me from asking all the questions today. I appreciate that. She's asking, what about sending your kid to college? So we're going to go one step north of elementary and high school. Is the college situation better or worse, or just different because of the size and scope of college? Who wants to take that one?
I think we could take it from both the contagious aspect, and I can take it from some of my concerns about the behavior aspect.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I would say, I will go as I was mentioning. So in which community that college is located? How's the transmission in that community? And what is the risk that as a family you are willing to take? And then I will take that decision. There's not a yes or no. It will be, okay, I'll send, but that this could happen. Basically, the question is, there 0% risk of transmission if I send my kid to college? Can you guarantee that? The answer will be no. So then you'll have to weigh the options with the information that you have. And I actually posted what Dr. Casa was referring on the CDC. I think this website is very helpful. They even have like a list, a checklist for the families to give them an idea of what risk they will be taking. So that will be my question, my answer, sorry.
Thank you.
So my concern is about, if you think back to that slide where I talked about the development of kids and adolescents. So most of our college students are late adolescents. The frontal lobes, that really most mature part of your brain, doesn't come online until you're about 25. So here you are with students in fairly close quarters, and they're being told to do ABC, but they're not good at assessing risk. They're not good at delaying gratification. They're not good at thinking of a bigger picture. So I have concerns that some of the problems that we see in college, many college students on the whole, in terms of risk-taking behaviors and not adhering to certain cautions, is sort of a recipe for a situation to develop.
Yeah, and I know universities like the University of Houston are spreading out their dormitories, and they're trying to avoid 4 to a room, or not a room, a suite, instead of 2 to a suite. And instead of, in our case, we'll have half the students on campus that we would normally have. But it's really about those social gatherings at the college level, isn't it? It's really about those urges to go and be with 10 or 15 other people at the college level. Wouldn't you agree? That's probably the danger spot if you're a college student, is the fighting the social urge.
Yeah. I even imagine the 10 kids in a dorm room watching Netflix with a pizza, no mask.
Yeah, exactly. I have 1 or 2 more questions. If our audience has any, that's great, but we'll have answered these couple. This one's kind of not an offhanded question, but is there regular sick anymore? And I ask that because, to your point, Dr. Casal, your daughter immediately thought she had COVID. Is the medical world kind of seeing that people aren't coming, they immediately think they have it because the mental pressure has been so good for 5 months that the sniffles and the headache and the stress in the shoulders may just be those things and not COVID first? And how do you combat that in people's heads about thinking the first thing they think is, I have the worst case scenario?
So yeah, I think that that's the case. I mean, I think that if anybody gets it, like, your allergies get bad and you get a little cough, could it be COVID? But I think we have to take it in the context. Remember, the most common symptoms are things like fever, and that's something you can objectively measure, cough, aches. And so I think we have to look at the big picture. So cough doesn't necessarily mean it's COVID, but if you've got a cough and fever and aches and chills and nausea and loss of taste or smell, you need to get tested. It's interesting on the healthcare side. They monitor our temperatures every day, and we have to report twice a day in our clinic whether we're having any of a long list of symptoms or not. And they've told us that if you have a headache, you need to call and you need to let us figure out what you need to do about that headache. So they've taken a very, very conservative stance on at least the symptoms that healthcare providers are presenting to their clinical sites with.
Wow. So this has been really great. We have time for one or two more questions. I see Nancy has a question for you, Dr. Casa. With so much online and virtual life today, what will the future be like for teens and screens? It seems like it will be difficult to limit time on screens in the future.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I will tell you that I am always a parent trying to fight the good fight with screen time. But I think that we're going to revise that understanding of screen time into what's going on in that screen time. If that is screen time, we're teaching our medical students right now through Microsoft Teams. And is it ideal? No. Do we wish we were in person? Oh, yeah. But we can't do that. We can't assure ourselves that would be totally safe right now. So the way that I'm looking at it for my kids is, yeah, they're going to have time in front of their laptops, and that's going to be a pretty long day. And then they can play their games afterwards for the same amount of time that they played before. So my kids have a pretty structured way of earning their time with electronics. And I told them that next Monday when school starts, we go back to the system where they don't get unlimited electronics, they earn electronics. Wow.
Well, that's great. So we're gonna wrap it up with one last question for each of you, and this has been fantastic. We thank you so much for joining us. What is the thing that when you hear it most about COVID or the COVID situation, and I'll ask Dr. Matuk this first, that irks you the most when you hear something that either is put out and it's constantly incorrect, or something that that you hear something and it makes you go, that's just not quite right, or you wish the community would do something else that you could, if you had a magic wand, you would say, I wish I could get everybody to do this and we'd be better off down the line. What would that thing be?
I wish we have a plan, right? I think if there's no strategy, then we're all pulling to different sides and the boat will get nowhere. So that's what concerns me most. As the medical professionals, we can take care of a disease, but if there's no national plan, I think that's a problem.
That's an excellent and straightforward answer. Dr. Casal, how about you? In your space, what do you hear?
I wish we could separate science from interpretation and ideology. When all of this started, one of my colleagues said to me, she said, it's science. It doesn't think or feel, and it doesn't have an opinion. And unfortunately, I think science has become victim of how you interpret it, not what it says. And yeah, science is hard. Science moves around, and many people are watching the challenges of science in real time. But we can't misinterpret it, the challenges of doing science through an ideological lens.
Yeah, someone once said it's very hard to dispute a fact.
Yeah.
Facts are the facts. You can interpret it a certain way, but it's still the fact.
And it's the interpretation that's become kind of toxic.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we really appreciate the partnership with the College of Medicine. This is wildly helpful to not only the group that's joining us here, but everyone that's now watching us as we send this off to our alumni and make this available as a resource. And I hope we can visit with you back on the backside when we find a vaccine and talk about what that's all about. And what's going, and hopefully this won't go too much longer, but both doctors, I want to thank you both on behalf of our 300,000 alums for stepping up. I want to wish you luck for starting a medical college right in the middle of a pandemic. I want to wish you luck with that, and we're always here to help you, and thank you so much. For all of you that have joined us here and all of you that have watched us at home, thank you so much for your time. I want to remind you that we have all of our webinars listed at houstonalumni.com/webinar. And you can find all the information there. On behalf of our team who's helped put this together, and on behalf of our partners at the College of Medicine at the University of Houston, I want to thank all of you for joining us here this evening. And wherever you may be joining us in the world, please be safe, be well, and go Cougs.